welcome to Edison Open House Transport Futures 2021. Now in this session, we're going to be focusing on the work of QuantumScape, a company that develops solid-state batteries. And with me is its CEO, Jagdeep Singh. Jagdeep, welcome.
Thanks, Vivian. Great to be here.
So you better tell us, first of all, what are solid-state batteries and what's QuantumScape's business model with these type of batteries?
Sure. So by way of context, a conventional lithium-ion battery, which is the type of battery that's used for most applications today, from consumer electronics to electric cars, is based on a liquid material known as the electrolyte. That is the medium through which lithium ions are transported within the cell. And of course, that lithium ion transport is what allows you to store energy and then release energy when needed. That liquid introduces a number of key challenges, some safety challenges, energy density challenges, fast charge challenges. And in a solid state battery, you replace that liquid electrolyte with a solid state electrolyte. So this is a solid material. In our case, it's a ceramic material that conducts lithium ions through the solid body of the material, roughly as well as they conduct through a liquid electrolyte. And once you do that, you can adopt an architecture that gives you higher energy density, fast charge, safer operations, which are the key requirements for mass market EVs today.
So, real significant difference in terms of charging, the amount of energy from the mass that you have, and more significant life to it, for instance, the number of charges that you can have?
Yeah, so I don't want to bore your audience with too many technical details, but in a conventional battery, there are three main components. There's a cathode, which is the positive electrode. There's an anode, which is a negative electrode. And in the middle, there's a separator that is porous, and that whole cell is flooded with a liquid electrolyte. And all the battery does is when you charge it up, you're forcing lithium to go from the cathode uphill to the anode, where it sits until you discharge it, and then the lithium wants to come back to the cathode. And in that process, you can get energy back out of the battery. So it's the electrochemical equivalent of rolling a ball uphill, which requires that you put energy into the system. Once the ball is sitting at the top of the hill, energy is stored, and you can get that energy back by letting the ball roll back downhill, because the ball would rather be at the bottom of the hill. It's the same exact concept with the battery. Now, the problem is that liquid electrolyte introduces a number of challenges. One is it requires a carbon or carbon silicon anode material. That takes up volume in the cell and has mass, so it lowers the energy density. Energy density is, of course, is the amount of energy you can store in a finite amount of volume or a finite amount of mass. In addition to that, it takes a finite amount of time for lithium ions to diffuse into those carbon particles in the anode. And that's a fundamental material property that you can't change by trying to charge it faster. If you try to do that, lithium metal will start essentially backing up on the surface of the carbon anode and leading to structures called lithium dendrites, which are needle-like crystals of lithium that will penetrate through the separator and short-circuit the cell, causing a catastrophic failure. And then the liquid itself is flammable. It's a hydrocarbon. It's a fuel. Like gasoline has almost as much energy as gasoline does. So even a fully discharged battery can burn. So when you eliminate the liquid and replace it with a solid, you get all those benefits in one fell swoop. So the energy density goes up because you can eliminate the carbon anode and simply use an anode of pure metallic lithium, which is much more energy dense than carbon. The safety benefits get better because now the solid state electrolyte or separator is non-combustible, unlike today's liquids. The cycle life, to your point, benefits also are improved, because now in a conventional cell, there's a chemical side reaction between that liquid electrolyte and carbon anode that consumes a little bit of lithium on every cycle, resulting in a slow degradation of the capacity of the battery, which of course is why your cell phones eventually, after a couple of years, die. And so when you go to a solid state system, because you've eliminated that liquid, you eliminate that chemical side reaction between the electrolyte and the anode, and now you have better life characteristics. So all those problems are solved with that one change of replacing the liquid electrolyte with a solid state electrolyte, which then allows you to get rid of all the carbon and silicon in the anode and simply have an anode of pure metallic lithium. The same lithium that's cycling up and down during charge and discharge just plates itself on top of this solid state separator to form an anode of pure metallic lithium. And that's the source of all of the benefits of a solid state battery.
Now, lithium is a finite resource, and we're becoming ever more conscious of that. Can the lithium be re-extracted, as it were, at the end when the battery finally does come to the end of its life?
Yeah, that's a great question, Vivian. So in a conventional combustion engine, the fuel, the gasoline, is of course consumed in the process of driving the car. You're literally burning the fuel, and you're getting reaction side products. Various gases are formed now, like carbon dioxide and so on. You can't then convert those gases back to fuel. In the case of a lithium battery, the lithium that is being moved inside the cell during charge and discharge is just being moved from cathode to the anode. It's not being consumed. So over the life of the cell, you don't need any more lithium. It's the same lithium that is there at the beginning of life that is still there at the end of life. And then at end of life, you can then recycle that battery, extract the lithium, and in fact, you can extract all the metals that are in the battery. You can extract the nickel, manganese, cobalt that are in the cathode and use them to make new materials. In fact, depending on the spot price of these commodity metals, it can be actually more cost effective to get those metals from recycled lithium-ion batteries than from mining them in the field. So there are a number of companies, in fact, that have started that are focusing on exactly this challenge, to basically take the massive number of lithium batteries that are sort of expected to be in cars, and extract those key metals, use them for new cathode materials and new anode materials. So short answer to your question is the lithium in the cell doesn't go anywhere, and yes, it's fully recyclable at end of life.
Now, QuantumScape has had a lot of media attention recently, but it's not the only kid on the block in terms of solid state batteries. Can you try and explain how your technology differs from perhaps some of the other solid state battery developers and manufacturers? Absolutely.
So because of all these benefits that we discussed about solid state, higher energy density, which means more driving range on a single charge, faster charge, so being able to recharge the battery in 15 minutes, for example, safer operations, better life characteristics. Because of all these key benefits, people have worked on solid state batteries with lithium metal anodes for several decades, for more than 40 years. Unfortunately, the bottleneck has been finding a material that can conduct lithium ions as well as today's liquids do, but that prevents lithium metal dendrites from forming. So dendrites, again, are these needle-like crystals of lithium that can grow from the anode to the cathode and short-circuit the cell, which of course would lead to a fire, which is obviously not a good thing. And so people have worked on many different classes of material over the last 40 plus years. Unfortunately, none of them have shown the ability to resist dendrites at real-world levels of current density or power and real-world temperatures. So if you take those materials that are not capable of preventing dendrites, but run them at elevated temperatures, for example, 60 or 70 or 80 degrees Celsius, or run them at very low current densities, meaning very low rates of power, then you can actually make cells out of those materials. But when it comes to practical levels of temperatures and current density or power, none of those materials have shown that they can resist dendrites. So the key differentiation that we bring is we spent 10 years developing a material that has shown that it can, in fact, operate under those real world conditions. So, near room temperature, for example, instead of elevated temperatures, and at high enough rates of power to be able to, for example, charge the car in 15 minutes. That has never been shown before. And those are the results that we showed back in December. Because we have that material, we can now make these solid state cells with lithium metal anodes, and other players in the space, really even today, we're not aware of anybody that can make batteries with a solid state separator and a lithium metal anode, as opposed to a carbon or silicon anode, that can operate under these uncompromised test conditions.
That's hugely exciting. When do you see production of batteries using your technology scale?
Yeah. So this is, of course, the main challenge we're currently focused on. So, we, in some ways, you could say that we took on two big challenges when we started the company. The first challenge was to find a material that could work with a solid state battery, or in a solid state battery. We've shown that we have such a material, and we have hundreds of patents around the material and other innovations that we have. But the second part of the challenge really was to take this material and get it into mass production. And that part of it we haven't yet done. We are working on doing it. It will take us some time, just because the tools that we use to make this material are tools that, while they're available at scale today and are used in various industries already, they are large tools that have long lead times. And so as those tools come in and we configure them, and then as we go through the automotive qualification cycle, this will take a few years. And what we've said publicly is that we expect to be in commercial production in the 2024-2025 timeframe. Luckily, we have a great partner, which is Volkswagen, one of the world's largest car companies. As you know, they own lots of iconic brands, from Porsche to Audi to the VW brand itself. We are building a manufacturing joint venture with them, 50-50 owned joint venture that will mass produce these cells for use in their cars. So that's the path that we're on. We've got a number of key milestones that we need to hit this year, next year, the following year. We've been working on. We demonstrated single layer cells last year. This year, we've been working on multi-layer cells. Next year in 2022, we'll have cells in a commercially relevant form factor. In 23, we'll turn up our pre-pilot production line, which will produce hundreds of thousands of cells that will go into test cars. So we expect to see test cars on test tracks with our automotive OEM customers in 23, and then 24, 25, when we have full commercial production that your viewers will hopefully be able to buy.
Are you seeking additional funding beyond that partnership with Volkswagen?
Yeah, so we are fortunate that we are well capitalized. So between the initial capital that we raised when we went public and a follow-on offering that we did earlier this year, we have on the order of $1.5 billion of cash on the balance sheet, which is sufficient funding to get us into first production. In addition to that, the joint venture with VW allows for them to fund half of the capex and opex associated with that production plant that we're doing with them. So we feel like at this point we don't have any need for additional capital to get into first production. I will add that we the partnership with VW, while it's a fantastic partnership and it's been great for I think both sides, is not exclusive. So we, what we gave VW as part of that partnership is the right to be first with this technology. So as you know, VW owns a number of iconic brands, from Porsche to Audi to the VW brand itself. One of those brands will be the first cars in the market with our technology. But we are then free to pursue partnerships with other players. And we've said publicly that more than one automotive OEM has already tested our cells successfully. So as you might expect, we're seeing a lot of interest from the various car companies around the world for this type of solid state technology.
So Volkswagen at the head of the queue, but you're very happy to have an orderly queue assemble.
Absolutely, that's the goal.
Great stuff. So presumably this is for cars and, say, light vans, but not heavier trucks.
Well, the key requirement for the transportation application, whether it's a light passenger vehicle or a heavy truck, is energy density. Energy density, again, is how much energy you can store in a given amount of volume and mass. And that determines how far you can drive on a single charge. Now, the bigger trucks need more energy, but they also have more room for more battery packs. So, in fact, you can have the entire spectrum of transportation addressed with this technology. Having said that, we're going to be supply constrained, Vivian, when we start. As we build these factories, we are building factories as fast as we can, but there's far more demand right now for better batteries than there is ability to supply them. And so we expect that the first batteries will go into passenger cars, but over time, as we crank up our production capacity, we fully expect these to show up in the full spectrum of vehicles, and frankly, beyond that as well. We're seeing a lot of interest from, for example, consumer electronics companies, because they too need batteries that take up less room and last longer. We're seeing demand from the stationary storage grid applications for the power grid, where by storing energy in a battery, you can make wind and solar clean energy sources more dispatchable and more usable. So there's a lot of demand for better batteries across different segments. And the reason why we're focused on automotive applications is not because of an application fit set of reasons, but rather simply supply constraint set of reasons. And we know that if you try to be a jack of all trades, you can end up being a master of none. Our goal is to solve one problem really, really well, and then from there use that as a springboard to address other segments. And that first market for us is the automotive application.
And that leads me to the next question, which is really, it's fascinating. You are absolutely at the cutting edge here. And I wondered what QuantumScape's view of the future of transport was. How do you see things panning out? Are we going to be essentially the same car-driven society, but just powered by the kind of batteries that you've developed? Or are we going into a different transport future? Where do you see things going?
Yeah, so I think one thing that seems pretty clear to us is that if you have a battery that is competitive with the combustion engine in terms of energy density or range, in terms of power density or fast charge capabilities, safety, cost, cycle life, then there really is no reason to have a combustion engine-based vehicle, except for scenarios where you don't have an electrical infrastructure. So in the fullness of time, we would expect that with this type of technology, essentially all vehicles will be electrified, with the exception of vehicles that are used, for example, in the Australian bush, where you don't have infrastructure. So if you're driving somewhere where you just don't have electrical grid, you'll still want to use liquid fuels. But as long as you're driving somewhere where there exists a power grid, these EVs we think will be superior to combustion engines. And that's actually why we've been such an exciting opportunity. Is the automotive industry is one of the largest industries on the planet. It's a multi-trillion-dollar industry, and it's rare to see an industry that big, undergo a fundamental transformation, which is what's happening here. I mean, the powertrain is at the heart of the automobile, and to switch that out to an electrified powertrain is a pretty massive transformation that will frankly take decades. But we think in the fullness of time, there's no reason why virtually all of those vehicles won't be electrified. Now, relative to demand for cars as opposed to other modes of transport, you might end up in a world where you have self-driving electrified cars eventually, but that doesn't necessarily reduce the need for cars. So if the cars are driving themselves around, they may be they may be actually driven more than they would be if they were being driven by humans. So today, most cars at any given point in time are parked. But if you end up starting to let these cars self-drive themselves, you just put more miles on them at any given period of time, and so they'll need to be replaced more often. So we think that in the fullness of time, most cars will be electrified, and we don't see anything but growth in the overall market for vehicles.
So much more shared ownership, perhaps. But it's a very interesting future that you paint. And this, of course, is all being driven by climate change. I mean, it's accelerating the need. And I wondered how important environmental, social, and governance aspects are to your business. I mean, obviously, climate change is up there and central, but what other impacts has had on your business of incorporating an ESG strategy? I mean, has it, for instance, affected your share price?
Yeah, I think you correctly identified climate change as a huge problem that we as a species need to address. Electrifying transport, we think, is one of the key elements of the solution, because transportation accounts for between a quarter and a third of all emissions worldwide. So it's a huge contributor to the problem, and you can't really solve it without solving transportation. Electrifying the powertrain is a really important part of that overall solution. It's great to see many governments recognize this and take proactive steps to try to encourage the adoption of electrified powertrains for vehicles. Our view is that no amount of government subsidy or incentive can replace products that people want to buy. So you have to have cars that consumers want to drive. If you don't have that, then it's like pushing on a string. It's just the demand has to be there to make it work. And so, in terms of making cars that customers want to buy, what we've seen from some of the leading EV players in the world today, obviously people like Tesla and others, is you can make electric cars, electric powertrain driven vehicles that are just really fun to drive. I mean, these cars are not just cleaner, which is great, but they're actually in many ways more fun to drive than combustion engine based cars. I've been driving EVs for many years now, and when I drive a combustion engine based vehicle, it always fascinates me how unresponsive they are. In an electric car, when you step on the accelerator, you have virtually instant torque response, so very responsive driving. Whereas with a combustion engine, when you step on the accelerator, a lot of things have to happen. The valves have to open, fuel has to go into the combustion engine, it has to burn, that power has to drive the pistons have to transfer power to the drive shaft, which has to then deliver power to the wheels. All that takes a fraction of a second, and that's a noticeable gap once you're used to getting instant response in an EV. So we think the beauty of EVs is that they're not only better for the environment and not only contribute to helping address this climate issue, but they're actually more fun to drive. You can make cars that are just more enjoyable, and that's really, I think, where the future lies. At the end of the day, you have to make products that help the environment, but that people want to buy because they're more fun to drive. And so, as much as we welcome government assistance, things like higher fuel efficiency standards and so on, those will help. But at the end of the day, you've got to have better batteries that can enable that better driving experience.
The consumer is looking for, a way to combat climate change, and that's very important to them now. But are you also seeing a change in investors in terms of their ESG requirements, and that to be part of the mix when investing?
Absolutely. I mean, I think ESG has become a really important part of many investors' portfolio models, and I think we happen to be squarely in the middle of that. I mean, the whole company exists because of the E in ESG, and I think that we do benefit from that. Our view is that this is not just a fad or a short-term kind of thing. We think it's a really important long-term kind of a mission, and so we believe that this transition will continue for decades, and at the end of the day, we think investors stand to make a lot of money if we can execute on what we're doing. We'll create a lot of value, and a lot of the investors that took the risk on us in the early days, we think we'll have an opportunity to see great returns, if we can execute.
When you look at your business and when you think about the part that you're playing in a sustainable future, what is it that you're most proud of? What is it that you're going to tell your kids? This is what Dad did.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is probably the combination of two different things. One is the problem itself is a really important problem, right? We talked about the climate issue, and it's in some ways an existential problem for the species, right, or for the whole planet. So taking on a big problem is something that I think we're proud that we had the courage to do that. When we started the company, it wasn't clear that a solution existed. I think we told our investors early on that we don't know if we can solve the problem, but if we do solve the problem, we could really change the world. So that was part one, was taking on a big problem, and part two is we're really proud of the work the team has done over the last 10 years to actually find a solution to a problem that has been unsolved for more than 4 decades. The goal of a solid state separator, solid state electrolyte, solid state battery has been kind of a holy grail in many ways for the battery industry. And the fact that the team, through some just really diligent work over the last 10 years, has found a solution is something to be proud of. So, and that's obviously the team as a whole that did that. Several hundred individuals that work collaboratively with many hundreds of millions of dollars of resources, with great support from our investors and our customers. All that put together, I think, allowed us to solve the problem. And if we can get it into mass production, as we plan to do and hope to do, then we think that's something to be proud of.
I'm pretty convinced, Jaideep Singh, that you'll make your family very proud. Thank you so much for talking to us about QuantumScape.
It's been a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.